Sure. So, raise your hand. I will bring you. Whoa! I will bring you the microphone, and you can ask your question. We'll start over here.
So, if Rocky Mountain National Park maybe not the best year-round habitat, are you concerned or worried that they're going to go to Loveland for habitat?
Do I use this? Yeah, I mean that's a scenario that could happen, but like many of us have said, we have no clue, and it's just so hard to predict what wolves will do. Is this actually doing anything? Yeah, we think that could be something that could happen, but we don't have any way of predicting it. And I'd say more and more we think it's unlikely that we would have wolf packs like Yellowstone had that lived entirely in the park, just because we have so much high elevation, and we have very few ungulates in the winter. The exception would be if wolves really started keying on moose.
Thank you all for being here. I was so excited that this group is coming together, and I really appreciate all the information. The one question I have, based on what was successful in Yellowstone, is there any chance for having like a soft release in Colorado, so the wolf packs maybe try to form and not just be totally dispersing individuals?
Yeah. You'll get your exercise in today. So the basic difference between a hard release where you just open the crates and the animals go out versus a soft release where the animals are in an acclimation pen for a period of time. We considered that, and it's far more expensive to do that, to build the pens, to guard the pens, and to do things like that. It was a feasible thing to do in Yellowstone. It's not. It could be, but it's just the expense associated with that really kind of makes that not an option for us to do. And the wolves in Idaho were released using soft or hard releases as well, and they did well as well. So if it's an expense we don't have to use, then maybe not try it.
Quick question: in Colorado, are there financial incentives other than paying the ranchers for killed livestock? Are there financial incentives to encourage them to use the fences or other techniques to, keep out the wolves?
Who wants that one?
Me, I guess. They're all pointing at me. No, there's not. I mean, there's some management efforts have done a pay for presence kind of a thing, where if you have wolves in the area, we'll pay you if there's a den on your property or something like that. We don't have anything like that in Colorado at the moment.
Here you go, Eric.
Yeah, I think the key word that you use is incentives, and that may not be the right word. There's a bunch of programs that are oriented towards getting resources to ranchers. CPW's dumped a lot of money into that, into non-lethal work. NRCS and through Wildlife or WLA, Western Landowners Association, have scored some grants that bring a few $1 million in to help ranchers. There's a center at Colorado State University that's focused on this called the Center for Human Carnivore Coexistence. There's a group in Colorado called the Colorado Conflict Reduction Group that is a formation of NGOs, ranchers, agency personnel that bring resources to these problems, specifically prevention. And then the other biggie is that Colorado State Extension is heavily engaged in this as well as Colorado Department of Agriculture. So I kind of broadened your question, but I wanted to highlight Colorado has kicked ass on this kind of thing in terms of really getting resources to the ranchers, and they deserve tremendous credit for that. So
thanks.
And a little plug for the Rocky Mountain Wolf Project. We pulled together an idea to create a specialty license plate that all of the revenue goes to Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and it is all in support of non-lethal measures, facilitating coexistence. That plate just became available last year, I think it was almost $1 million. It was about $800,000 that wolf specialty plate. So if you see that around in Colorado, take a look at it and consider purchasing one. All the money goes right to that.
I spend too much time in North Park to put that on my car.
Yeah, there's that. That is a thing.
Okay, I'm gonna come sit these back here.
But that was your job, to have those hard conversations.
You've asked us to be advocates of the value of bringing gray wolves back to the environment. And I just want to point out that it might be a useful tool. Doug may know of this, that there's a YouTube, a short video about the remarkable restoration of an ecosystem in Yellowstone after you brought back the gray wolf. So it's a useful tool for us to promote that the need to bring back the gray wolf. My question is the donation box still at the corner over here?
We are always accepting donations to help fund our work. This is for Eric, actually. Eric, I may be just knee-jerk since I've been working in wolf issues in Montana for nearly 2 decades. And my concern is futuristically, when you do have those packs and those numbers, what is your methodology for counting? Because as you may or may not know, Montana is false, horrific, I promise wrong. Where are you gonna go with that?
Thanks, Kim. So counting wolves, counting anything wild is hard, right? We can do a minimum count, which is very feasible for us to do right now. We have this huge population of wolves. Well, a huge proportion of our population of wolves is collared. We know where animals are right now. As there's reproduction, as there's more uncollared animals on the landscape, that gets progressively harder. Almost very, very difficult to have any kind of really robust estimate as to what that population level is. And so it's always going to be an estimate. We will use modeling, different kinds of modeling. We've got people far smarter than me to do this. I will say the agency's really stepped up in a lot of this. We've hired a data monitoring and coordinator, just finished her PhD. Brendan Cassidy is going to be great at doing this. We've got biometricians that are really, really good at this. And so all of those different things are in development. And we have this opportunity right now with such a large proportion of animals collared that we can test some of those models. And so we can do our protocols to say, okay, if we implemented this protocol, this is what we would estimate, and then we can go back and using kind of this double-blind effort. And so we're in this process of developing what those protocols are and recognize fully that the challenges that other states have dealt with in coming up with how many wolves do they have on the ground.
Do not model Montana.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
My question is for Will. Thanks for going over all the different studies happening in Rocky Mountain National Park, especially around moose. It's really interesting to see the different ways that you all are looking at the complexity of the ecosystems. And I'm wondering, since all those studies were done, especially regarding the impact of moose before wolves were really introduced or brought into the park and start shaping that ecosystem, are you considering pausing any actions on moose to wait to see how the wolf impact plays out, just to kind of get a better sense of how that new variable might impact all those different pieces that you're looking at?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I mean, first off, we don't expect the wolves to have a dramatic effect on the moose population. I think the best data we have on that is from the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, where they have elk and they have moose, and there we see that overwhelmingly they're selecting elk. So I think I'm reluctant to use statistics in front of someone who actually knows the number, but somewhere around 95%. Yeah.
Very few moose.
So we don't expect them to have a big impact on the moose population. That said, any type of plan that's made is usually robust to that kind of issue. So a great example is the Elk and Vegetation Management Plan. The plan wasn't we're going to cull X number each year. It was we will monitor the population and cull if the population goes above 600. And that means that any type of other effect on the population, like wolf predation, is kind of baked in, right? It just means that we wouldn't cull because the population is down because of wolves. So anything that happens with moose, and we don't have any specific plans, we would use something like that that's flexible.
Okay, I'm gonna come back here for a second.
Hi, I have a question for Will. You said something really interesting. Yeah, you said something really interesting to me about willows and aspens in Rocky Mountain National Park. And just recently, last weekend, we were in State Forest State Park, which for those of you that don't know, is just north of Park. It's really like 20 miles north of here as the crow flies. We noticed lots of willows, like an abundance of flame willows, and also an abundance of new growth aspens. And that really stood out to me because I haven't really seen that in the park or in this area. And I was curious if you might be able to speculate as to why that's present in State Forest State Park, just north of here, where there's also quite a healthy population of moose.
Yeah, a few things there. So one is that we don't have hunting in the park. And so we're a big patch of land that doesn't have hunting, and we haven't had hunting for over 100 years. And so I don't think that other areas of the state have had the same wetland impacts that we've had from herbivory. And yeah, the other thing is that if you walked into the park, say like near, there's a few spots like 20 years ago, like what I showed in the in Kawanichi Valley, where you walk in there 20 years ago and you're like, wow, there's still a lot of willow here. It's not like a light switch is switched where all of a sudden there's no willow. It's a really slow process. So just by looking at someplace one time, it's difficult to tell whether the trend is down or up. So that's the only caveat with that. So maybe they are experiencing declines, but I don't know if you know much about it. Okay.
I've been lucky enough to go to Yellowstone and read Rick McIntyre's books and follow the wolves up there. In Colorado, you're releasing a very social animal singly. So what is the success rate if they're out there by themselves trying to hunt and succeed?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so we do release them individually, but they're typically released 5 at a time because of the way that those shipments that come in. And so that 5 animals are released same general time and space, with 10 or so following shortly thereafter. And so they release, and then sometimes they'll move no distance from that day, or a mile or 2, or sometimes they'll move 20 miles. But the wolves, they're social animals. They've made their living being social, and so they have developed ways to find each other, whether it's through scent or sound or other ways. And so they are social animals. They will find each other. And we have not really, when animals are moving around kind of on this independent walkabout kind of an area, if they cross areas where there have been other wolves, sometimes we notice that they do slow down and spend more time where there is already active wolf presence. So that's to say that we released some animals from British Columbia, went off on their own, came into areas that had been already occupied in not really a territorial kind of a way, but just in a use way, and from animals that were already on the landscape, and they'll check that out for a bit. Sometimes they'll be welcomed, sometimes they won't into that environment.
In the back here.
I actually have a couple questions, but one, I live in Lynn Haven, and it seems like the population of the mule deer has decreased, has been decreasing. And I mean, I think the mountain lion population may be increasing, but if the wolves come in, what are we gonna do if our mule deer population starts decreasing too much?
You want this one, Bud?
We're making
can you earn your living?
I offered Doug this one, he denied. So I'm not familiar with that. I know the area that you're talking about, I don't know exactly what's happening with the mule deer population. It's not a good strategy for a predator to eat all of its prey, right? So there's, kind of as Doug demonstrated, on a big scale, we certainly do not expect wolves to have a catastrophic effect on populations as a whole. I mean, so some of the numbers that Doug said on I think it was 140, 150,000 elk is what Montana says that they have. Colorado has 300,000 elk, 400,000 deer, mule deer and white-tailed deer. So locally, there may be impacts, and that you may experience that. It may move animals in a different area so that you're not seeing the same number of deer or elk in a particular drainage or a basin that you're typically used to, or hunting or something like that. On a statewide scale, we certainly don't expect that to happen, especially right now with less than 50 animals, 20, 30 animals that we have on the ground. And so locally, you may see some of those changes in behavior of the prey, but from a big scale, I don't expect that we'll see big changes.
I can always ask more questions.
Okay. Did I see a hand back there?
I'm just curious about when you're out capturing the wolves, how many, if any, were released because they weren't appropriate?
Yeah, good question. I have to think about it. Not many. I mean, there was one animal that I can think of that had an eye injury that we didn't take, and so that animal was collared and re-released. And I think we caught one pup that was just too young. It was born that year that we didn't want to take it. That was part of our defining criteria. So, of the 15 animals that we caught, I'm probably forgetting a few, but the proportion was relatively low of what we did not take back as candidates.
Is it on? Yeah, one of the really interesting things about this project was the ballot initiative. It's one of the fundamental tenets of wildlife conservation is that wildlife is held in common, and this was kind of one of the few times where the common folk have said what will happen to wildlife. But one of the really unique things following that is whereas game and fish wildlife agencies typically have been funded almost entirely by funds related to hunting and fishing. In this case, Eric, you can use your fingers. How many dollars of license dollars have been spent on the introduction of wolves? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 0.
Right.
Okay. And then how much of, for the first time, substantial general fund tax revenues from our state taxes that have paid for this project? Roughly, how much has been expended?
Yeah. I see some confused looks. So budgeting is not my expertise, and financial management I'm not that great at that either, if you ask my wife. So typically, as a state wildlife agency, most of our revenue comes from the sales of hunting and fishing licenses. And it's called an enterprise agency. We do not get typically general fund money, the way Colorado Department of Agriculture or Colorado Department of Transportation is funded through taxes. This is an instance where the legislature did give us money. They gave us, I'd probably say the wrong number, so I'd be reluctant to say anything, but in the order of a couple of $1 million to fund a lot of the work that's gone into it. And some of that is for the compensation side of things, and some of it is for some aspects of the translocation side of things. And so I don't know if those numbers are exactly right, so don't hold to that. But it's a substantial,
it's a huge breakthrough in terms of a wildlife agency, a state wildlife agency, getting substantial funds.
Yes.
To manage wildlife that belongs to all of us, and now there's a breakthrough that there's a shared responsibility, not just on the backs of people that would hunt and fish,
Yeah, right. So it's the first time that I'm aware of that any program that I've been associated with has used general fund in a large way to support the whole effort.
I'll speak to that just a little bit because this is my day job is working on advocacy and trying to help the agency do their work. Funding for Colorado Parks and wildlife agencies generally, you're right, is relying on a lot of hunting tags, and in Colorado it's primarily out-of-state hunting tags makes up the bulk of that money. I would say that folks in the wildlife advocacy space recognize this, and I think the hunting folks have talked about this too, that they sometimes say like, well, we're carrying all the weight for the agency, right? There has been a lot more attention being placed on how do we raise funds for the agency so that we have a greater stake and we're contributing more to it. And so I think you're going to see over the next few years, 1 to 5 years, some more plans coming out to help fund the agency to do this kind of work that's so important to us, that kind of, quote unquote, non-consumptive, non-game species restoration work.
One other point, outside of this, but the public comment period is open for the strategic plan for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So if folks are interested, get on the Parks and Wildlife website and make your desires known for the strategic planning process. I think it runs middle of May, maybe?
Yep.
I'd like to just second that. I think it's really important for all of us to make our voices heard in the planning process, not after the plans are made, but while they're being made.
Yeah, also to the guy up in the White House, right? So, Joanna, your perspective on this talk was so complimentary and such a unique approach in looking at the history and trying to understand the attitudes with the wolf. Is that how you always approach your animal subjects, or has the wolf been unique because of the attitudes you've encountered?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. I have spent a career asking evolutionary questions and addressing those questions with data that I collect in ecological time with real animals in wild spaces. I must say this is the first time that I have been confronted with all the species that I've worked with, which has been many for many, many years. The first time that I felt so compelled to figure out what the hell is going on, right? Like, and from the human perspective, one of my areas of kind of interest, research interest, is in human-wildlife conflict and coexistence. So I have thought about it quite a bit, but not in this kind of deep, deep way that I really felt compelled to address. And so this is really just what you saw today wasn't necessarily me giving you data, or it wasn't a big science talk. It was big picture, me trying to gain insight into what might be going on. I think that, and there's much more to it, right, than what, I didn't talk about individual experiences with wolves, which is a huge part, sociocultural processes that shape, attitude. There's a whole other area of many, many other areas that would flesh out the answer. But what I wanted to do is to really address it at that deep time level. And really, to me, it's quite profound, right? That for I can't speak to lower latitudes, right? Because gray wolves aren't in lower latitudes in the old world, and here in North America, down only into Mexico. So that's why I'm referencing Northern Hemisphere. But it is truly striking to me that for all of our evolutionary history, in the northern half of this planet has been shared with gray wolves, right? And this will sound trite. I don't mean for it to, but I was struck by that when we were in the midst of the pandemic, right? And I lived just down the road in Lyons, and you may all remember that Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock, people would step outside and start howling.
Yes.
And yes, acoustically, it's a really useful way of getting a long call, right? So many mammals have long calls, right? But why it was gray wolves to me was, it was, you know, it was titillating to me, right? Like, and you'll often hear folks, you know, across the spectrum, regardless of what they think about wolves or what their opinions are of wolves, speak to that there's something about the howl of a wolf that is deeply resonating, right? And I would offer that it's because it's also kind of very familiar, right? We have existed, even if we truncated it 10,000 years ago, right? Which is when everything changed and we settled down into villages and permanent settlements. Up until 10,000 years ago, we were just one of many, you know, species living in a landscape with multiple predators, right? And this is, we've lost track of that. I love Doug's words on speaking to the wild, right? Because I think we yearn for it. It's an ache within us, and so it's both iconic that it's wolves that we're talking about today, and also just for me, I just always like to get at the heart of things and understand things evolutionarily. So thank you for that question. That was long-winded to answer.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, Andy.
Okay, I'll have a question. So Doug referred to the simple packs versus the more complex packs. So do those packs have select for different prey species, and do they have different hunting techniques? And then a follow-up question, or maybe related, could you describe a typical day in the life of a wolf, if there is such a thing?
I like that second question.
Okay, easy question. No, you know, so a little bit of work done in Yellowstone. Dan McNulty worked on the optimal number of wolves to kill a certain prey species, and he came up with 4 for elk and 11 for bison, and the curve was still increasing for bison because there weren't a lot of samples of larger packs killing bison. So what that suggests is it take, you know, for bigger, and moose, muskox, and bison are the 3 most formidable prey for wolves. And it may take experience, it may take larger males. Males are better in the takedown. Females and young males tend to be speedier and faster, and they tend to be more important in the chase of the target. Having chased several hundred wolves with a helicopter, males are just lumbering dogs that don't go very fast. So you need those sleeker, faster wolves to lead the hunt. And so I think what that tells you is, and you know, Eric was talking about, you know, wolves are very social, and their natural condition, their typical pack structure is complex. That's where they evolved to be. Since Joanna's next to me talking about evolution, you know, through evolutionary time, I would say on the landscape, most packs were complex, but there's always packs settling new areas, colonizing, and then there's always openings within a saturated wolf population, and those are by singletons meeting opposite sex members and starting out a new pack. What's key about that is in Yellowstone, those pairs don't do very well because it's a high density, very competitive population. But typically wolves occur at low density on the landscape. I mean, Eric's talk was, you know, very good at describing wolves in British Columbia. Wolves typically occur at low density. So everything you see in northern Yellowstone is in some ways unique because it's a very high density system. And so these simple packs can form in a not very competitive environment, you know, because there's not many, if there is a big pack around, you're not running into them all the time. And so wolves are social, and so the answer to the second part of your question, what's the average day for a wolf? To describe a wolf, you describe it 3 different ways. They travel, they kill, and they're social. That is in essence a wolf. And so their day is going to revolve around one of those things. And because they're crummy hunters, they're very bad hunters. They rely on volume. They test and test and test. They encounter a lot of prey. So that's the traveling part. They're very good at moving. they can probably move at 8 kilometers an hour endlessly. I mean, they can go 40, 50 miles in a day, trot, and if the terrain's not tough, the snow's not deep, they can trot, and they evolved to sample out of prey. A cougar doesn't do that at all. They don't have to move much, they're hiding, they're checking things out, they spring. And then when they find that prey, they kill it. And then when they, kill it, they eat it usually as a pack, and they take care of their young. And there is some evidence that they take care of each other when they're sick. So their life daily revolves around those three things. And they're like us. They're like every other critter. When you don't have to do anything, you don't. So you spend a lot of time resting, sleeping, and if you can do those 3 things without much energy expenditure, you spend most of your time sleeping. Now, the one thing I've left out is their territoriality. And so maybe the 4th aspect is they're super competitive. They have a competitive mindset, always worried about the neighbor, and you will try and keep them out to the point that you will kill them. And that is the leading cause of wolf mortality in a non-human impacted population. They are going to kill each other. It's an intrinsic regulatory mechanism that a lot of other animals don't have. And it limits their population, and it can be triggered by food stress. So that's an extrinsic factor. So that's an interplay between self-regulation and external regulation. And in essence, that's a wolf. So I would argue they want to be in big packs. They usually are prohibited from being in big packs because we go in and mess it up. And so they're very adaptive and they're very flexible behaviorally. And so if we go in and kill them, they'll resort themselves and repair and constantly be starting new packs. And that's why you get small packs and simple packs a lot in Wyoming, because they're constantly resorting themselves out. Did I answer the question? Yeah.
Does that create a higher density if you have lots of smaller packs, or would a large pack?
The question was, will you get a higher density with smaller packs? And in general, yes, although that's highly variable. Pack size is, territory size is very flexible, and it's only loosely guided by several things, and one of them is prey density. But it's still highly variable within similar prey densities. But yeah, simple packs, some people, maybe this is me that I'm referring to, refer to the territory as a refrigerator. So you have a refrigerator big enough to accommodate your needs as a pack. In other words, the prey density that's in your territory. So you're going to have a smaller territory if you have fewer animals in it, but they're highly flexible. And the key to that is, I think, important for Colorado. As soon as wolves moved into Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, everyone said, my hunting went to hell. And no, and actually elk are a lot more responsive to human hunters than they are to wolves. I've flown the boundary of Yellowstone numerous times, and there is a herd of elk bedded down during the day with a pack of wolves right next to them, and hunters in Blaze Orange on the park boundary, hoping the elk cross over so they can shoot them. And the wolves and the elk are together, away from the hunters. They can be very, these pack territory sizes can be very, very flexible based on pack size. Yeah.
I love hearing that our wild animals know exactly where the park boundaries are.
Okay, I think we have time for one, maybe 2 questions.
Yes, I was just wondering, as far as survival of like, if I was hiking on my property or walking with my 5-year-old granddaughter and I encounter a wolf, what is the best way to behave around a wolf? And, what's the likelihood of it attacking us? Or would it be more likely it could attack my granddaughter or me, or what would I do?
Okay, who wants to start?
Sure. I think wolves are the least dangerous large carnivore in North America. I don't know of a case where wolves ever attacked anybody upon their first encounter. Almost all wolf attacks have been through habituation, They have to lose their wolves are naturally afraid of people. I'm not sure why. Maybe because of bipedalism, but they have to lose that natural fear, and they do it through exposure to people, usually, but not always, through food conditioning. Not always. Mark McNay was an Alaskan wolf biologist. He summarized all wolf attacks in North America during the 20th century. I believe there were 20 or 21 non-rabid wolf attacks, and most of them were food conditioned wolves that ended up biting. Some of them, no fatalities. I think there's been 3 fatalities since 2000. That's when the data collection for that paper ended. But, you know, a cougar or a grizzly bear, I don't know about black bears, might attack a person on their very first encounter with them. It's like literally the first time they've ever seen a human, they might attack. Wolves never do that. They have to overcome their natural fear of humans. Having said that, don't run. Experiment jogging in a neighborhood around here with dogs. If a dog runs out at you and you keep running, it's going to run after you. Stand your ground. That's a very effective strategy for natural prey. Very effective. So stand your ground, clump together, stand there and yell and scream, act crazy, actually. Like you're gonna go nuts. Like that wolf will look at you like, this woman's crazy, I'm not gonna go near. I mean, they're not gonna do anything. I'm 99.9% sure, but the probability is not 0. So it almost is, but it isn't. So you still need to exhibit these things, don't run. If it gets even closer to you, you wanna throw rocks at it, throw sticks at it. It's not like a bear where you wanna play dead. That wolf comes in, you wanna protect yourself. But I've chased wolves away by doing the crazy routine, and they always run for their lives like they're scared of me. Always. It works super well.
Okay, one last question.
I'm just curious, is there a single source that someone could reference that would have actual information that you could use to act like someone in terms of misinformation that's being used out there? Is there some place you could access to get easy answers to address some of these concerns that people bring up regarding the wolves that you might not know offhand, off the top of your head? Would there be one single source you could access?
So, Colorado State, the Center for Human Carnivore Coexistence, in cooperation with Colorado State Extension, put out, this was probably 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, these peer-reviewed sort of fact sheets that addressed a bunch of different topics. And so I would kind of look at that like wolf fact sheets, Colorado State Extension, and I'm guessing you'll get to them. But if you don't, then contact me and I can put you there. But yeah, there's I think CBW also has something similar to that.
And they're beautifully done, and they're just like 1 or 2 pages, and well illustrated, user friendly. But I also wanted to give a plug for my colleague here, because he will probably be too humble to bring it up, who has recently published an absolutely beautiful on wolves. It's a collected edition, right, in the sense that there are multiple chapters by multiple authors, and it is the state of our understanding of the science of wolves. It's called Yellowstone Wolves, right? I think. Yeah, Doug is so it's just beautiful. Anyway, just had to give that plug.
The references Stuart cited and Joe cited are great. Doug's book is great. And the Colorado Parks and Wildlife website is a good source for information as well. Thank you.
All right. Just to wrap up, I need to thank the sponsors. So we have had some generous donations for this event to help with food, lodging, so the endangered species
Coalition, the Rocky Mountain Wolf Project, Visit Estes Park, Trout Haven Resorts, Mountain Berry Bakery, Con Coffee, Sweet Basilico. They have all made donations to help this event possible. And of course, all of you with your kind donations. The last thing I would like to say is that we always strive to make these events better, and so we have a survey. We have hard copy sheets in the front if you would fill those out, or you can go online with QR code depending on your level of comfort with technology. And finally, of course, we love your support and your donations. So just to wrap up, our panelists have agreed to hang out here for another half hour or so. If you would like to chat with them some more. And thank you all very much for coming and being a part of this event.
Thank you.